Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. So this video is all the cases I've carefully handpicked, and in case you're a regular viewer, just know there's no repetition, and every case in this video is new for this channel. Please enjoy. Mark van Dongen, UK. Early in the morning on September 23, 2015, a woman named Nick White was woken by loud screaming and her doorbell ringing. When she looked outside, she saw a man standing in the street. He was wearing only his underwear and looked like he was covered in mud. At first, she thought it might be a prank, but the man was crying, screaming, and begging for help. Other neighbors came outside after hearing the noise. As the neighbors got closer, they realized the man was not covered in mud. His skin was badly burned and coming off his body. The man was Mark van Dongen, who was 28 years old. Mark was originally from the Netherlands. He had moved to the UK to study and worked as an engineer. He had been in a long relationship with a woman named Magdalena Solis, who was much older than him. Friends later said the relationship was troubled. Mark had scratches on his body, and on one occasion, boiling water had been poured on him while he slept. Mark eventually left the relationship and started seeing someone new. In early September 2015, Magdalena began searching online for information about acid attacks. She read many cases and then bought strong acid online. Around the same time, Mark contacted the police and said Magdalena was harassing him and his new girlfriend. He also told his father that he was scared of her and worried she might hurt him. On the night of September 22nd, Mark went to Magdalena's flat to make it clear that the relationship was over. He decided to stay the night. At around 3 a.m. while Mark was sleeping, Magdalena went into the kitchen, poured acid into a cup, and returned to the bedroom. She woke Mark, said that if she could not have him, nobody could, and then threw the acid directly into his face. Mark ran out of the flat in terrible pain, screaming for help. Neighbors called emergency services and helped him into a flat where he was placed under a cold shower. When paramedics arrived, they found Mark with very serious burns to his face and body. He was taken to the hospital right away. On the way, he kept saying that he could not see. One of his eyes had been badly damaged. Mark told police that Magdalena was responsible. Police went to her flat and arrested her. Mark's new girlfriend was checked and was unharmed. At the hospital, Mark saw his injuries and said he did not want to live anymore. He was placed into a coma for several months. One of his legs had to be removed, and his face was badly damaged. His injuries were so severe that even his father could not recognize him at first. When Mark woke up, he could barely move and later became fully paralyzed. He suffered great pain and sadness. In late 2016, he was moved to a care home, but the care was poor. His family later brought him back to mainland Europe for better treatment. Mark later developed a serious lung infection. A medical procedure meant he would no longer be able to speak. This loss was too much for him. Since euthanasia was legal in Belgium, Mark applied and was approved. He died on January 2, 2017, at the age of 29. In court, Magdalena was found guilty of throwing a corrosive substance with intent and was sentenced to at least 12 years in prison. In 1988, a woman named Irene May was living a hard life. She struggled with drug use and stayed in a trailer with another woman named Kerry Dalton. Kerry also used drugs. The two women did not get along, and their problems kept getting worse. Kerry believed that Irene was stealing her jewelry and selling it to buy drugs. One day, Kerry went through Irene's purse and said she found some of the missing jewelry inside. This made Kerry very angry. She told Irene that she would have to work more around the trailer to make up for what she had done. From that point on, the anger between them grew. Kerry and one of her friends, Cheryl, later believed that Irene had a serious illness. They became scared and angry because they had shared needles with her. This caused even more fear and rage toward Irene. Around this time, Kerry heard that Irene was telling people she was afraid Kerry might kill her. Kerry then decided she would protect herself and started carrying a knife. On June 26, 1988, Kerry and Irene got into a big fight inside a trailer owned by a woman named Joanne. During the fight, Irene was tied to a chair. Kerry's boyfriend Mark was there, along with Cheryl. They all agreed that Irene should be killed. While Irene was tied up, Kerry filled a syringe with battery acid and injected it into Irene's leg. The group then used a heavy pan to beat her, breaking many bones. They also shocked her using wires. After that, Mark stabbed Irene several times with a tool and then with a knife. These wounds finally killed her. After Irene died, Kerry and Cheryl cleaned the blood from the trailer. Mark and another man called George took Irene's body and placed it in a truck. They drove to a Native American reservation. There, Irene's body was cut into pieces, and each piece was buried in a different spot. Irene's body has never been found. Later that day, Joanne came home and saw Kerry and Cheryl cleaning the kitchen. She noticed blood, a bloody pillowcase, and a bloody tool. When she asked what happened, Kerry said she had fought with Irene and that Irene left. Joanne felt something was very wrong. When Mark came back, he was dirty and had blood on him. After everyone left, Joanne called the police. When police arrived, they did not believe Joanne. The trailer looked clean, and they said Joanne seemed high and scared. The police left without taking action. Irene had 3 children. She had lost custody because of her drug use, but she was trying hard to get them back. When Child Services could not reach her, they reported her missing. Police searched for years, but did not find her body. In 1992, police questioned Kerry, Mark, and Cheryl. Cheryl told police everything. Mark confirmed parts of her story. Kerry said she was innocent and denied everything. In 1995, Kerry was sentenced to death. Mark was sent to prison for 25 years, and Cheryl was sentenced to 15 years. This case happened in Sydney, Australia, on July 20th, 2019. It involved a 25-year-old woman named Jessica Camilleri and her mother, Rita Camilleri. From a young age, Jessica had many problems growing up. She was slow to walk and talk, and she struggled at school. She found reading, writing, and maths very hard. She was often bullied by other students and had trouble making friends. As a teenager, Jessica was suspended and later expelled from school for attacking other students. At home, she often argued with her family and became aggressive. At one point, she went to live with her grandmother, but this did not help, and she soon returned to live with her parents. Over time, the stress caused her parents to separate, and her father left the home. Rita stayed with Jessica and continued to care for her. She tried to protect her daughter and support her, even when things became very hard. Over the years, Jessica became more violent. She attacked strangers in public by pulling their hair. She also began making many phone calls to random people, threatening to hurt or kill them. These calls scared many people, and police became involved more than once. By 2019, Jessica and Rita were living alone together. Jessica's behavior had not improved. On July 19, 2019, Rita learned that Jessica had again made threatening phone calls. Rita took Jessica to a police station, where an officer warned her to stop this behavior. After that, they went home. The next day, 20th of July, 2019, a young family member, only 4 years old, came to stay with them. Rita gave the child extra care and attention, which made Jessica angry and jealous. That evening, Rita ordered takeaway food for everyone. Later that night, Jessica said she had a bad stomach pain and needed a doctor. When the doctor arrived, Jessica was on the phone ordering more food and would not hang up. After waiting for some time, the doctor left, believing Jessica had made up the illness. After the doctor left, Rita became very worried. She called her older daughter and said she thought Jessica needed to be taken to a hospital for help. Rita then tried to call emergency services. Jessica became angry, grabbed the phone, and followed her mother into another room. Jessica attacked Rita, knocked her to the ground, dragged her into the kitchen, and grabbed a knife. The 4-year-old child saw what was happening and tried to help, but Jessica pushed him away and injured his face. The child ran and hid. Jessica continued attacking her mother until she died. Afterward, Jessica went to a neighbor's house and asked them to call the police. She then returned home and called emergency services herself. Police arrived and found Jessica covered in blood. Inside the house, they found Rita dead and the young child badly shaken and injured. The child was taken to hospital and later needed surgery. Jessica told police she had acted in self-defense, but evidence showed this was not true. She was arrested and later charged. In court, the jury decided she was guilty of manslaughter, not murder. She was sentenced to more than 21 years in prison. Rita was remembered by her family as a loving mother who never gave up on her daughter. The case remains one of the most shocking crimes in Sydney in recent years. Lynda Spence was a young woman from Glasgow. She was close to her parents and spoke to her mother, Patricia Spence, every day. When Lynda suddenly stopped calling, her family knew something was very wrong. Lynda had worked in banking and later tried to run her own business. At first she failed and went bankrupt. Later she tried again and started a property business. She appeared successful and lived a rich lifestyle. She spent money on nice clothes, cars, and nights out. To many people it looked like she was doing very well. In truth, Lynda was getting money by lying to people. She convinced families and investors to give her large sums of money for property deals that did not exist. When people asked questions, she used charm and lies to delay them. Over time, more people began to realize they had been tricked. One of those people was Colin Coates. He had once been very successful, but later became violent and involved in crime. Lynda took a large amount of his money and promised big returns. When he realized the deal was fake, he became angry. Lynda tried to calm him and told more lies to buy time, but the money was already gone. Lynda also took money from others, including John Glenn, who sent her threatening messages when he realized he had been cheated. By this point, Lynda was scared. She had taken money from dangerous people and could not pay them back. In April 2011, Lynda visited her parents. Her mother noticed she seemed tense and worried. Lynda said she was going out briefly and would return soon, but she never came back. The next day, she went to a house owned by Colin Coates. She went there willingly, likely believing she could talk her way out of trouble again. Instead, Coates and Philip Wade took control of her. They moved her to another flat owned by David Parker, where Paul Smith also lived. Lynda was held there and could not leave. Coates and Wade returned every day to hurt and threaten her while demanding money that no longer existed. Parker and Smith were afraid of Coates and did not report what was happening. They later said they feared for their own lives. Lynda was allowed to call her parents once. She sounded calm, but she did not say where she was. This was the last time her family heard her voice. Later, Lynda told Coates that some of his money had gone to John Glenn. Coates used this to threaten Glenn and get some money back. Even then, he did not let Lynda go. By the end of April 2011, Lynda was killed. Her body was removed and has never been found. The people involved cleaned the flat to remove all signs of what had happened. Lynda was reported missing in May. Her mother later made a public appeal, begging for information. At first, people were too scared to speak. Eventually, John Glenn went to the police after being threatened again. This led police to Parker and Smith, who told them everything. Lynda Spence was held captive in an attic for nearly 2 weeks, tied to a chair, blindfolded, and unable to move or use the toilet. During this time, she was repeatedly tortured. She was burned with a hot iron and cigarettes, had fingers and toes crushed and cut, and her kneecaps smashed as her captors demanded money she no longer had. After she was killed, her body was removed, and the house was thoroughly cleaned to destroy evidence of what had happened. In court, Parker and Smith received long prison sentences. Philip Wade was sentenced to 30 years. Colin Coates was given life in prison with a minimum of 33 years. Lynda's body has never been recovered. Her parents asked many times for the truth so they could lay her to rest, but no one has ever said where her remains are. Her family described her as kind, caring, and loving, and said they will always miss her. The case of Brian Waters took place in the United Kingdom in June 2003. It is known as one of the most shocking crime cases in British history. At the center of the case was a man living under a false name. He called himself Andrew Lamb and lived a rich life in Malta. In truth, his real name was Christopher Jr. Before the crime, Christopher had worked in secret investigation and media research. He was smart, skilled, and trusted in his work. However, he later became involved with dangerous criminals. One of these criminals was John Wilson, a violent gang leader. Wilson pulled Christopher into serious crime. Another man connected to Wilson was Brian Waters, a middle-aged man who was growing illegal plants at a farm in Cheshire. Brian worked for Wilson and owed him a large amount of money. Brian ran the farm with help from his adult children, Gavin and Natalie, and a worker named Solomon Razak. After Brian was robbed near Christmas, he fell deeper into debt. Wilson became angry and suspected Brian of hiding money and running the farm without permission. Wilson ordered Christopher to watch Brian and his family. Christopher followed Brian's son to the farm and discovered the illegal operation. He reported this back to Wilson. Soon after, Wilson sent a group of men to the farm to steal everything and punish Brian. The group included Christopher, James Raven, Otis Matthews, and David Moran. David stayed outside to watch for police, while the others went inside. When Solomon Razak arrived at the farm, he was attacked and badly hurt as the men demanded money he did not have. Later, Brian arrived and was also attacked. He was tied up at his cannabis farm near Knutsford and tortured for around 3 hours while his children were forced to watch. He was hung upside down, beaten with metal objects, shot with a staple gun, repeatedly dunked in water, and finally had a plastic bag set on fire over his head, which melted onto his face. He died from the injuries. The gang then went to Brian's home and took his wife Julie, believing she might know where the money was. While this was happening, David Moran called the police and reported an attack at the farm. Police arrived quickly. Some of the attackers escaped, but James Raven was caught. Officers found Brian dead, but Julie, Gavin, Natalie, and Solomon were still alive. All were badly hurt and deeply traumatized. The crime scene contained strong evidence, including DNA and phone records. This led police to arrest Wilson, Otis Matthews, and David Moran. David agreed to help the police and later entered witness protection. Christopher fled the country and hid for many years. He lived openly in Malta under his false name, believing he was safe. In 2019, he was placed on Europe's Most Wanted and was arrested weeks later. He was sent back to the UK to stand trial at Chester Crown Court. In 2021, Christopher was found guilty of murder and sentenced to life in prison. John Wilson, James Raven, and Otis Matthews also received life sentences. It later came out that Christopher and Raven had once worked as undercover media researchers for the BBC. The case left lasting pain for Brian Waters' family. His wife and children continue to live with the loss and trauma of that night. Lacey Fletcher was born on November 25, 1985. She grew up in Slaughter, Louisiana, a small town north of Baton Rouge. She lived with her parents, Clay Fletcher and Sheila Fletcher. As a child, Lacey went to school and later was homeschooled. Over time, she began to struggle with mental health problems. She was diagnosed with autism and social anxiety. As she got older, these problems became worse. At some point, Lacey stopped leaving the living room of her home. She stayed on a couch and refused to move from it. Her parents said they believed she was afraid to leave the couch. They brought her food and drinks and placed items near her so she could use the bathroom without standing up. Over the years, Lacey stayed in the same spot. She did not receive regular medical care. The last time she saw a doctor was many years before her death. On January 3, 2022, at around 2 a.m., Sheila Fletcher called 911 and said her daughter was not breathing. Emergency workers arrived at the house and found Lacey dead on the living room couch. Police quickly saw that something was very wrong and treated the home as a possible crime scene. Lacey's body was very small and weak. She weighed only about 96 pounds. She was found sitting in a deep dip in the couch, which showed she had been there for a very long time. Police said it appeared that her body had become stuck to the couch. She was surrounded by human waste, and the floor near the couch was damaged from years of urine and feces. Lacey had severe open sores on her body. Some were so deep that they reached the bone. Her hair was tangled and dirty, and insects were found in it. Her body was covered in waste, and her skin showed signs of illness and infection. Police also found foam from the couch inside her stomach, which suggested she may have eaten the couch because she was very hungry. Near the couch were small items like lotion, powder, and spray. There were also children's movies nearby. A toilet and piles of clothes were close to where she sat. The house had a very strong and overwhelming smell, according to police and medical workers. Doctors later said Lacey did not die suddenly. They believed she had been dead for at least 1 or 2 days before 911 was called. The official cause of death was severe medical neglect. She suffered from malnutrition, infections, lack of movement, and untreated sores. These problems led to a serious body infection that caused her death. Authorities believed Lacey had been living on the couch for around 12 years. On January 18, 2022, police interviewed Clay and Sheila Fletcher. They said Lacey chose to stay on the couch and made her own decisions. They claimed she never complained about pain and did not want to leave the living room or go to a hospital. In May 2022, Clay and Sheila Fletcher were charged with second-degree murder. They were arrested and later released on bail. In 2023, the charges were briefly dropped due to a legal issue, but the couple was charged again and arrested once more. The case continued through the court system. Lacey Fletcher's death shocked many people and raised serious questions about care, neglect, and responsibility. Darren Rainey was a 48-year-old man living in Florida. He was homeless and had lived a hard life. Darren was very poor and had struggled for many years with serious mental illness. He was diagnosed with schizophrenia, a condition that can cause fear, confusion, and seeing or hearing things that are not real. Because of this, Darren had trouble keeping a job and often moved from place to place just to survive. In 2010, Darren was arrested for a non-violent drug offense. He did not hurt anyone. He was sent to Dade Correctional Institution in Florida and was given a 2-year sentence. Darren was only a few months away from being released. Inside the prison, Darren noticed that some guards treated inmates very harshly. Even small rule breaks could lead to violence. Guards often used force, pepper spray, or batons. Darren was quiet and tried to stay out of trouble, but he was still often targeted. Being mentally ill did not protect him. He spent much of his time reading the Quran in his cell. A few months before his release, guards took his Quran away. After this, Darren became very upset and anxious. Even though he was taking medication, his mental health got worse. One day, Darren had a breakdown. In his cell, he covered the walls with his own waste. Guards rushed in, yelling, and dragged him out of the cell. They said they were taking him to clean himself in the shower. As they walked, they passed several open showers. Instead of using those, they took Darren to one specific shower. Other inmates nearby knew this shower was dangerous. It was hidden from camera view, and guards could control the water temperature from outside. The guards locked Darren inside the shower and told him he would not be let out until he was clean. Darren turned on the water. Very quickly, the water became extremely hot. He tried to turn it down, but the controls inside did nothing. The water kept getting hotter. The shower space was very small, and Darren could not escape the water. He screamed for help and begged the guards to stop. Other inmates heard him crying and saying he was sorry. The guards did nothing. Darren was left in the shower for over 2 hours. Eventually, his screams stopped. When guards finally opened the door, Darren was lying on the floor. He was dead. The water had been so hot that parts of his skin had come off. The next day, another inmate was told to clean the shower and reported finding pieces of skin in the drain. Police investigators came to the prison and spoke only to the guards involved. Darren's body was examined by the medical examiner, who said there were no burns and ruled the death an accident. Darren's family was told he died of natural causes, possibly a heart problem. Years later, Darren's family and a journalist continued to search for answers. Other inmates came forward and confirmed hearing Darren scream for hours. They also said the shower had been used before to punish inmates. Tests later showed the water in that shower could reach up to 180 degrees, far hotter than a normal shower. Photos of Darren's body were released years later and showed severe injuries. Still, no guards were charged. In 2017, the state said again that Darren's death was an accident. However, the state paid Darren's family $4.5 million. To this day, Darren Rainey's death is officially listed as undetermined. In 2014, a woman named Sarah Sands moved with her 5 children to Silvertown. Sarah was 31 years old and was raising her children on her own. She moved because she wanted to live in a place where people knew each other and helped one another. She hoped for a strong community where she and her children would feel safe and supported. Soon after moving in, Sarah began meeting people who lived nearby. She made an effort to talk to her neighbors and be friendly. That is how she met a man named Michael Plested, who was 77 years old and lived alone next door. Michael seemed kind and helpful. Many people in the area knew him by face. He spent a lot of time outside talking to neighbors and children, and he volunteered to help with local work. Sarah and Michael became close. Sarah checked on him often, helped him with meals, and kept him company. She trusted him. Michael also showed interest in helping young people find small jobs. One of Sarah's sons later began helping him at a local newspaper shop with Sarah's permission. After some time, people in the neighborhood began to talk. Rumors spread that Michael had harmed children in the past. Sarah was shocked and did not want to believe it. She kept her children close and stayed alert, but before she could fully understand what was happening, Michael was arrested. After his arrest, Sarah learned the truth. Michael was not his real name. His real name was Robin George Roy Molt. He had been convicted many times in the past for abusing boys. These crimes went back decades, starting in the 1970s. Because of when the crimes happened, his name was not on public lists, and many people had no idea who he really was. Sarah later learned that 3 of her sons had been abused by him. The boys were very scared and ashamed, and they were afraid to speak openly at first. Sarah reported what had happened and moved her children away to keep them safe. Even after his arrest, Michael was released on bail and sent back to his home, very close to where Sarah had lived. This made her extremely afraid for her children. On November 28, 2014, Sarah went to Michael's apartment. She was upset, emotional, and had been drinking. She later said she only wanted him to admit what he had done and to plead guilty, so the children would not have to speak in court. When Michael told her the boys were lying, Sarah lost control. She stabbed him several times, and he died. Right after it happened, Sarah called the police and turned herself in. She did not run away or hide what she had done. She told police she did not plan to kill him and that she believed she was protecting children from further harm. Sarah went to trial in 2015. The jury found her not guilty of murder, but guilty of manslaughter, meaning she acted while overwhelmed by emotion. She was sentenced to prison. Later, her sentence was increased on appeal. In 2018, Sarah was released and returned to her children. Today, Sarah and her sons have spoken out to raise awareness and to help protect other children. Emma Walker was a teenage girl who lived in Knoxville, Tennessee. She went to Central High School, where football and cheerleading were a big part of school life. In 2014, when Emma was only 14 years old, she became the only freshman to make the cheerleading team. She loved cheerleading and worked very hard at it. Emma was known as kind, caring, and full of life. She had big dreams and hoped to one day become a nurse who cared for sick babies. While cheering at a football game, Emma met William Riley Gall, who went by Riley. He was 2 years older and played football for the school. At first, Riley seemed polite and friendly, and Emma's parents thought he was a nice boy. Soon, Emma and Riley started dating and became a popular couple at school. Over time, things began to change. Riley became very jealous and controlling. He did not like Emma spending time with friends or talking to other people. Emma's friends noticed this and became worried, but Emma often said everything was fine. Riley would send many messages, call Emma again and again, and wait outside places for her. When they broke up, he would beg for forgiveness and promise to change. Emma's parents were very concerned. They tried many times to get Emma to end the relationship. They even took her phone away, but Riley found ways to keep in contact with her. For about 2 years, the relationship continued on and off, with many arguments and breakups. In late 2016, Emma finally decided she was done with Riley. Her parents noticed she seemed happier and more like herself again. Emma told her friends that the relationship was over for good. On the night of November 18, 2016, Emma went to a friend's house. While there, she received strange and scary messages from an unknown number. The messages told her to come outside, or someone she loved would get hurt. Emma believed this might be a prank. Soon after, Emma and her friend saw Riley lying in a ditch nearby. He claimed he had been kidnapped. Emma told him they were broken up and asked him to leave her alone. The next morning, Emma noticed a man dressed in black near her house. She became scared and contacted Riley, asking for help. When her mother came home, she found Riley and Emma talking outside and told Riley to leave. On the night of November 20th, 2016, everything seemed normal. Emma went to bed just after midnight. Riley called her many times, but Emma did not answer. In the early morning hours, Emma's father heard noises but did not see anything unusual. Around 6 a.m., Emma's mother went to wake her for school. Emma did not respond and was not breathing. Police soon discovered that Emma had been shot while she slept. The bullet came through the wall from outside her bedroom. Evidence showed the shooter knew exactly where Emma's bed was. Riley quickly became the main suspect. His phone records showed he had been near Emma's house that night, even though he said he was elsewhere. His friends told police that Riley had taken a gun from his grandfather and asked how to get rid of fingerprints. Riley later asked them to help throw the gun into a river. Police set up a plan with Riley's friends. When Riley brought the gun to throw it away, police arrested him. Riley was charged and later found guilty of first-degree murder and stalking. He was sentenced to life in prison. Emma's family continues to honor her memory. Scholarships and memorials were created in her name, and she is remembered for her kindness and bright spirit. In 2008, the American TV show Wife Swap featured a family called the Stockdales. The show was about two families with very different lifestyles. The mothers would switch homes for 2 weeks. In the first week, the new mother followed the rules of the house she joined. In the second week, she could change the rules. After that, the families would meet and talk about what happened. The Stockdale family lived in a small rural area in Ohio. The parents were Tim and Kathy Stockdale. They had 4 sons: Calvin, Charles, Jacob, and James. The family lived on a farm and had very strong religious beliefs. Tim worked outside the home, and Kathy stayed home to teach the boys. The children were homeschooled. Kathy said she wanted to protect her sons from outside influences and teach them strong values. The family had many strict rules. The boys were not allowed to watch TV, play video games, or listen to music unless their parents approved it. They were not allowed to date. They had to wake up early and eat meals at the same time each day. If they were late, they had to pay a small fine. The boys earned tokens by doing chores. They could trade these tokens for small rewards, like listening to a radio show that their parents approved. The family did not spend much time with other people. Kathy believed that too much free time and socializing could lead to bad behavior. She wanted her sons to always have a clear purpose in what they were doing. They played together in a bluegrass and gospel band called the Stockdale Family Band. Tim and the boys performed at local events and competitions. Kathy managed the band. They made several albums and became well known in their area. On Wife Swap, Kathy switched places with a mother named Lori from a very different family. Lori tried to give the Stockdale boys more freedom. She allowed them to watch TV and relax more. One of the sons, Jacob, became very upset when the rules were changed. He cried and said he was afraid of disappointing his parents. This moment stood out to many viewers. After the show ended, life seemed normal for the Stockdales. The older sons moved out for school and work. The younger sons continued to play in the band with their father. The family stayed active in music and farm life. Then, in June 2017, everything changed. One afternoon, police received a 911 call from the Stockdale home, but no one spoke on the line. When officers arrived, they heard a gunshot. Inside the house, they found a terrible scene. Kathy and her youngest son, James, had been shot and killed. Jacob, who was 25 years old at the time, had also shot himself in the head but was still alive. Police said that Jacob had used a shotgun from the home. His father, Tim, and his two older brothers were not at home when this happened. Jacob survived, but had very serious injuries. He lost sight in one eye and had lasting brain damage. After more than a year in the hospital, he was charged with 2 counts of murder. At first, he said he was not guilty because of insanity. Doctors examined him many times. There were delays in the case, and he spent time in a mental health hospital. In 2021, Jacob changed his plea to guilty. At the sentencing, his family shared a message saying they loved him and forgave him. They asked the judge to be kind. The judge sentenced Jacob to 30 years to life in prison. To this day, no one fully knows why this happened. Some people believe the strict life at home may have caused stress. Others say we may never understand the full story. Sally Ann Bowman was an 18-year-old girl living in Croydon, London. She had recently moved into her own flat but remained very close to her family, especially her 3 sisters. Sally was talented, working as a model and a hairdresser, and had dreams of one day appearing on the cover of Vogue. She was known for her laughter, singing, and bright personality, and those who knew her believed she had a very promising future ahead. On the evening of September 24, 2005, Sally received a call from her sister inviting her to a friend's birthday celebration. She went out with her sister Nicole and a group of friends to a local bar called Lights. They spent the night drinking and having fun, leaving the bar around 1 a.m. Sally and Nicole took a taxi back to Nicole's house, where they planned to sleep. During the ride, Sally was on the phone with her ex-boyfriend, Lewis Ruston. They had recently broken up, but emotions were still raw. Sally eventually asked Lewis to pick her up from Croydon Town Center because her sister had been in trouble and couldn't help her. Lewis arrived around 2:20 a.m., and he drove Sally back to her home. The two argued inside the car for over an hour before Sally finally got out around 4 a.m. and Lewis drove away. Less than 3 hours later, around 6:30 a.m., a neighbor spotted what looked like mannequin legs behind a skip. When she approached, she realized it was Sally's body. She had been stabbed multiple times, leaving exit wounds, and her body showed signs of sexual assault. The discovery shocked the neighborhood and immediately drew a homicide investigation. Police initially questioned Lewis because he was the last person known to see Sally alive. He was taken in for 4 days and gave DNA samples, which later cleared him as a suspect. The DNA found on Sally's body did not belong to Lewis, but matched evidence from an unsolved sexual assault 4 years earlier, showing that her attacker was a serial offender. Investigators learned that the attacker had also targeted another woman on the same night, a few minutes before attacking Sally. This woman survived and was able to give a description and help create a composite sketch of the suspect. Despite having his DNA and a sketch, the police could not immediately identify the man. They conducted mass DNA screenings in the area, testing thousands of men to try to find him, but the search went on for months. The breakthrough came in June 2006, when a 35-year-old man named Mark Dixie was arrested for an unrelated fight. His DNA, taken during the arrest, matched the DNA from Sally's murder. Dixie had a long criminal history, including robbery, assault, and indecent exposure, but none of his DNA had previously been on file. Once identified, he fled to Amsterdam for 3 months before returning to the UK, acting as if nothing had happened. Police tracked him to his workplace and safely arrested him there. At trial in 2008, Mark Dixie's defense claimed he had not killed Sally, saying he found her already dead, but the evidence contradicted this. His DNA matched the crime scene, and witnesses placed him at the scene that night. He was convicted and sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 35 years, unlikely ever to be released. Sally's murder shocked her family and the community. She was a talented young woman with her whole life ahead of her. Madyson Maddie Middleton was born on October 5, 2006, in Santa Cruz, California. She lived with her parents, Laura Jordan and Mike Middleton, in the Tannery Arts Center apartment complex. Maddie was a happy and cheerful child. She loved swimming, dancing, drawing, and talking about wolves. Her sense of humor made everyone smile, and she could make friends with anyone she met. On Sunday, July 26, 2015, Maddie was playing at home while her mother spent time with a friend. She decided to ride her new white scooter around the apartment courtyard. Wearing a purple dress and a black helmet, she spent the afternoon riding, sometimes chatting with other kids but also enjoying time alone. At around 5:07 p.m., Maddie was last seen near the mailboxes outside the parking garage. This moment was captured on video, and after that she disappeared. As the evening came, Maddie's mother, Laura, went door to door asking neighbors if they had seen her. She could not find her daughter anywhere and grew very worried. Knowing Maddie was smart and confident, Laura did not think she would wander off alone. At 6:08 p.m., Laura called 911 to report Maddie missing. Friends, family, and neighbors searched everywhere, even checking homeless camps, parks, and beaches. The next day, July 27, 2015, after hours of searching, Maddie's body was found at 7:55 p.m. in a recycling bin in the parking garage of her apartment complex. A 15-year-old boy, Adrian Jerry Gonzalez, who lived nearby, was arrested. Investigators later revealed that he lured Maddie to his apartment with ice cream, assaulted her, and left her body in the bin. Astonishingly, Adrian even helped search for Maddie that day, asking neighbors and police about the progress. Adrian's background showed he had a troubled childhood. He grew up with his mother, Reggie, and faced hardships including family problems and financial struggles. Neighbors described him as a normal teenager who liked yo-yos and worked as a counselor at the tannery, so many could not believe he was capable of such a crime. Adrian was first charged in juvenile court, but was later transferred to adult court because of the seriousness of the crime. Judge John Salazar described his actions as cruel, callous, and planned. However, in 2019, a new California law prevented children 15 or younger from being tried as adults. After appeals and court rulings, Adrian's case returned to juvenile court. In April 2021, he pleaded guilty to all charges. Adrian expressed some remorse and said he wanted to work on himself to prevent hurting anyone again. He was sent to a state juvenile facility where he could possibly be released after 3.5 years, but must stay until age 25 at the latest. He will also have to register as an offender for life and pay restitution. Maddie's death left a permanent mark on her family and the community. Her parents and grandparents continue to live with the heartbreak. Liberty Libby Squire was a 21-year-old university student living in Hull, East Yorkshire, England. She was in her second year at the University of Hull and was known by friends as kind, funny, and welcoming. She loved spending time with friends and was close to her family. Although she had struggled with mental health and an eating disorder in the past, she was doing well at university and seemed happy and confident. On the evening of January 31st, 2019, Libby left her student home to meet friends. They gathered at another student house before planning to go to a nightclub called The Welly. Around 10 p.m., Libby texted her boyfriend goodnight and left her phone at home. At about 11:20 p.m., the group arrived at the club, but security refused Libby entry because she was very intoxicated and unsteady. Her friends stayed with her briefly, then put her in a taxi about 10 minutes later and paid the driver to take her home. They watched the taxi leave and continued their night out. The taxi driver later told police he dropped Libby near her house on Wellesley Avenue and saw her walking toward the front door. However, she never went inside. Shortly before 3 a.m., her friends returned home and discovered she was not there. Her phone was inside the house, and her keys were found in the garden. It was freezing cold, with snow on the ground, and they became worried. They called police immediately. CCTV cameras helped trace Libby's movements after she left the taxi. She was seen walking nearby streets at around 11:37 p.m. Minutes later, two people tried to help her when they saw her lying in the snow, crying and distressed. She refused help and continued walking. A group of students later invited her inside to warm up, but she kept walking. Police and volunteers searched the area, including the nearby River Hull, fearing she may have fallen into the water. A key breakthrough came when a resident reported hearing a woman scream near a wooded area around midnight. CCTV footage later revealed a silver car driving around the area repeatedly. The driver stopped near Libby, spoke to her, and after several minutes, she got into the car around 12:08 a.m. The vehicle then drove to nearby playing fields. Around this time, a resident heard screaming. The car left the area about 10 minutes later. Police later identified the driver as 24-year-old Pavel Relowich, a local butcher who lived nearby. He was arrested on suspicion of abduction and sexual offenses. Investigators discovered he had committed multiple disturbing crimes over previous years, including voyeurism, burglary, and exposing himself to women. Relowich first denied seeing Libby, then claimed he picked her up to help her and dropped her off. Evidence later showed his DNA was found on and inside Libby's body. 7 weeks after she disappeared, Libby's body was found in the Humber estuary. A post-mortem confirmed she had been assaulted and killed, though the exact cause of death could not be determined. In October 2019, Relowich was formally charged with assault and murder. During his trial in 2021, prosecutors argued he targeted Libby because she was alone, vulnerable, and intoxicated. The jury found him guilty of both assault and murder. He was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 27 years. In 1961, a very small farming village called Yerba Buena in rural Mexico was home to only about 50 poor farmers. The village was extremely isolated. There were no roads, electricity, or running water. The only way to reach it was by a rough dirt path through the jungle. One day, two teenage twins named Magdalena and Eleazar Solis arrived in the village. They were about 16 years old and came from the city of Monterrey. They had been traveling between small villages, pretending to be spiritual leaders in order to receive food and shelter. When they reached Yerba Buena, they decided to stay and run a longer scam. The twins claimed they followed the ancient true religion of Mexico. They told villagers that Magdalena was a reincarnated priestess and that Eleazar was a holy figure reborn. At first, they simply asked for food and a place to stay. Slowly, they began telling stories about old gods and secret spiritual knowledge. When villagers asked for proof of their powers, the twins created rituals. They made a special drink they claimed would give visions from the gods. In reality, it contained marijuana. After drinking it, villagers felt strange and became easier to control. The twins used these moments to strengthen belief in their lies. Over time, the rituals became more dramatic. The twins added animal blood to the drink and wore costumes with feathers and body paint to resemble ancient priests. Some villagers began to believe deeply, while others remained unsure. Two brothers from the village, Santos and Cayetano Hernandez, became loyal followers. They helped enforce the twins' authority and pressured others to obey. The brothers enjoyed their new power and forced villagers to give food and supplies. A small temple was built in a cave in the nearby mountains where rituals were held at night. By 1962, the rituals had become darker. During one ceremony, Cayetano asked for a volunteer to be sacrificed to the old gods, promising eternal happiness. Under the influence of drugs and belief, one villager stepped forward willingly. The victim was killed and their blood was used in future rituals. After this, sacrifices continued. About once a month, a villager would volunteer and be killed in the cave. Fear, drugs, and pressure kept others silent. Over roughly a year, around 15 people died. On May 31, 1963, another sacrifice was about to take place. A woman named Selena volunteered. Her childhood sweetheart, Hector, tried to stop her, but the crowd attacked her and she was killed. Hector, horrified, left the village and reported everything to the police. The next day, Hector returned home as instructed by authorities, but cult members discovered he had spoken to police and murdered him. Police soon arrived to raid the village. When officers confronted Cayetano, he attacked and killed one policeman with a machete. A gunfight followed. Several cult members were killed and many others were arrested. Magdalena and Eleazar were captured hiding in the cave. Inside the cave, police discovered the remains of the victims. The temple was destroyed and the bodies were buried. In the end, 12 cult members were convicted of murder. Authorities also found the cult had begun spreading to nearby villages. The case remains one of the most disturbing examples of manipulation, belief, and isolation leading to tragedy. "13-year-old Aarushi Talwar lived with her parents, Rajesh and Nupur Talwar, in an apartment in Noida, India. Her parents were dentists, and the family also had a servant who lived with them, named Hemraj. Aarushi was a good student and was close to her parents. Nothing seemed unusual about their life. On the night of May 15, 2008, the family followed their normal routine. Aarushi stayed in her room while her parents worked and later returned home. That evening, they had dinner together. Aarushi received an early birthday gift, a camera, and spent some time taking pictures. Around 11 p.m., her mother went into Arushi's room to switch on the internet router. Aarushi was awake and reading. After that, her parents went to bed. According to them, this was the last time they saw her alive. Sometime between midnight and early morning, Aarushi was murdered in her bedroom. She was struck with a heavy object and her throat was cut. Her body was found lying on her bed the next morning. At around 6 a.m., the housemaid arrived and rang the doorbell. Normally, Hemraj opened the door, but there was no response. Hemraj was missing and his phone was turned off. Because he was gone, the family first believed he might be responsible. Police arrived later that morning, but by then many relatives and neighbors had entered the apartment. This disturbed the crime scene and likely destroyed important evidence. Investigators found no sign of forced entry and no murder weapon. The next day, police discovered bloodstains leading to the terrace. When they broke open the locked terrace door, they found Hemraj's body. He had also been killed in the same way as Aarushi. This meant both murders happened during the same time period. This discovery changed the investigation completely. Police began looking at several possibilities. Since there was no forced entry, investigators believed the killer either knew the family or was already inside the home. A whiskey bottle with bloodstains suggested the killer had time to remain in the apartment after the murders. Some investigators focused on the parents. Questions were raised about how such a violent crime could happen without them hearing anything. Others pointed to the locked doors and the cleaned crime scene, suggesting someone inside the home may have tried to hide evidence. Another theory suggested that other domestic workers or acquaintances of Hemraj may have entered the apartment that night. Several men were questioned and even subjected to lie detector and narco tests. Different stories emerged, including claims that Aarushi was attacked and both victims were killed to silence witnesses. Later, investigators again focused on Arushi's parents, suggesting the crime scene had been staged and the injuries may have been caused by a surgical instrument. A golf club owned by Rajesh Talwar was said to match the injuries, though no blood or DNA was found on it. In 2013, a court found Arushi's parents guilty and sentenced them to life in prison based on circumstantial evidence. However, in 2017, the Allahabad High Court acquitted them, stating that the evidence was insufficient and the investigation had serious flaws. Today, the Aarushi Talwar double murder case remains unsolved. After years of investigations, conflicting theories, and intense media attention, no one has been definitively proven responsible for the deaths of Aarushi and Hemraj. On June 6, 1996, in Rolette, Texas, a small city north of Dallas, 26-year-old Darlie Routier called 911 at about 2:31 a.m. She told the operator that an intruder had broken into her home and attacked her and her 2 young sons. Her husband Darren and their baby Drake were asleep upstairs. Police arrived within minutes. Inside the home, they found a terrible scene. 6-year-old Devon was already dead, and 5-year-old Damon was critically injured. Damon later died on the way to the hospital. Darlie herself had cuts on her neck and arms. Darlie told police she had been sleeping downstairs with the boys while watching TV. She said she woke up when one of the boys stirred and saw a man dressed in dark clothing and a baseball cap standing over her. She claimed she chased him toward the kitchen and heard glass breaking as he escaped through the garage. On the floor, she saw a white-handled knife and realized she was covered in blood. She said she picked up the knife, then dropped it, and yelled for her husband before calling 911. During the 911 call, she mentioned touching the knife and wondered if fingerprints could have been taken from it. This statement was later used against her in court. Darlie was taken to surgery around 3:40 a.m. One wound on her neck was very close to a major artery, and doctors had to remove part of her necklace from the wound. Some reports described her injuries as serious, while others said they were minor. Police noted that a window screen in the garage had been cut. However, investigators soon began to doubt that an intruder had entered the home. A crime scene consultant claimed within minutes of arriving that there had been no break-in, and this belief strongly shaped the investigation. On June 18, 1996, Darlie was arrested and later charged with murder. Her trial began in January 1997. Prosecutors argued that she killed her sons to maintain her lifestyle and suggested she suffered from depression and emotional distress. They claimed her wounds could have been self-inflicted and that her behavior after the attack seemed unusual. Several pieces of evidence became key points in the case. A white tube sock stained with the boy's blood was found about 75 yards from the house. Prosecutors argued that Darlie planted it to support her story. The defense argued that the timeline made this nearly impossible. Another controversial moment came days after the funeral. On what would have been Devon's 7th birthday, family members held a small gathering at the gravesite. Video footage showed Darlie smiling, laughing, and spraying silly string. Additional evidence included blood in the kitchen sink area, a broken wine glass with blood beneath it, and testimony about blood patterns on Darlie's clothing. Some experts said the patterns suggested she could have been the attacker, while the defense noted her blood was mixed with her son's blood. In February 1997, Darlie was convicted of murdering Damon and sentenced to death. She has never been tried for Devon's death. She has continued to maintain her innocence and has filed many appeals over the years. The case remains controversial. Supporters argue the investigation was flawed and focused too quickly on her. Others believe the physical evidence and inconsistencies in her story point to guilt. Nearly 3 decades later, the question of what truly happened that night is still debated.
I'll handle the Unix. You handle the car with the explosives.
Have sealed their doom.
My people believe they have just claimed their freedom.
Is that what you told them?
Men need hope. I just gave them what they asked for.
Then your men need their leader. these outcasts, it seems I am less of a monster in death than I was in life.
It is the Black Hand and his captains who are the true monsters. They will return.